So, for all our viewers out there, do you want to introduce yourself? So, your name, grade, or I think major in college, what field you'd like to pursue in the future, what field you're pursuing now, just so our audience can get a sense of who you are.
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Anagha. I actually just graduated with a degree in biomedical engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta, Georgia. And so I will actually be starting my PhD in computational immuno-oncology um, in actually next October. I'm taking a year off to pursue a Fulbright before I do that, but I will be at the University of Cambridge as well as the National Institutes of Health to pursue that PhD.
That's awesome. That's amazing. So, are you working right now, or did you like just graduate?
Yeah, so I actually graduated in May.
Oh,
Then I was working following graduation at a immuno-oncology company that builds active urine sensors to measure how well cancer like immunotherapeutics work for particular patients.
yeah.
Um, but I actually quit my job probably a couple weeks ago because I'll be starting a Fulbright in November. So.
Oh, for your master?
No, so actually, I will be pursuing a Fulbright in Sri Lanka, like doing teaching actually. So I'll be
Oh,
teaching
that's
Korean.
awesome. Yeah, okay. So clearly you seem to have a lot of experience in STEM and just like pursuing degrees in the future. So how did you first get into STEM? Specifically, I think you said biomedical engineering. Yeah, and how's your experience been so far?
Yeah. So I actually got involved in STEM in kind of a very weird way. So I was a huge hypochondriac when I was younger. So I actually had a huge fear of cancer, which is now my field of focus. So it
Wow.
came full circle there. Yeah. So I had really bad hypochondria around cancer, and my parents got very like fed up with me being like very scared all the time and convinced I had like lung cancer or like lymphoma or like other things.
Yeah.
And so they gave me a book called The Emperor of All Maladies by Siddhartha Mukherjee, which is basically this book that's all about how kind of major discoveries in cancer biology were made.
Yeah.
And I like fell in love with this book. I loved the idea of looking at cancer from a more objective, like scientific perspective, as opposed to a very symptomatic, like easily manipulated kind of standpoint that I'd been looking at it from before. And so I just got me like very interested in biomedical research, and so I got very involved in research, kind of following that. And so I did science fair kind of throughout high school, which was a really like rewarding experience for me, and really introduced me kind of to the world of scientific research. And so that kind of led me to kind of pursue biomedical engineering at Georgia Tech, and then that in turn kind of got me involved in research kind of at Georgia Tech, and that kind of led me to where I am now.
Yeah, that's such an interesting story how you were scared of something at first and now you're researching and studying all about it. So, are there any projects or research opportunities that you worked on at Georgia Tech or just beyond that that were really exciting or something you want to share?
Yeah, so when I was at Georgia Tech, I got really so I knew I liked cancer, but I didn't know necessarily like what avenue I wanted to take in the study of cancer. And so I ended up joining an immunology lab at Georgia Tech. And the lab didn't focus on cancer specifically, but it focused kind of on two different avenues, so looking at immunology, so looking at like T cells and different immune cells in the
Yeah.
body, but then also on better like model systems
Mhm.
for various organs and organ systems. And so my work kind of focused on modeling the lymphatic system, which is kind of the secondary circulatory system of the body,
Mhm.
kind of the waste disposal system slash like the immune housing and immune transport system of the body.
Mhm.
And so I actually used microfluidic devices, which are these little almost like rubbery uh, devices made out of like polymer, and loaded them with cells to allow to kind of create a three-dimensional um, structure that cells can be housed in. So we can actually look at the geometric and like spatial properties of these cells. And so that was like a really, really rewarding experience. It kind of tied back to my cancer interests
Mhm.
because I was looking at structural differences in vascular formation between healthy lymphatic vasculature and then lymphatic vasculature that was associated with cancerous cells. And so it was really, really exciting to kind of be able to tie my work back to my original like cancer-based interests.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so awesome. Yeah. So I don't know how the ratio is in biomedical engineering, but how was your experience being a female in STEM?
Yeah, so I think I was lucky, I guess, in that Georgia Tech places a very high emphasis on diversity in STEM and like improving the number of women that pursue STEM fields. So actually, in a lot of my biomedical engineering classes, I found that the ratio was quite good. That being said, I can still remember probably the first electrical engineering class I took at Georgia Tech. There was only two other girls in a class of over 50. And I remember that being really, really intimidated on the first day because I had like never touched a circuit before. And it seemed like a lot of the boys in the class would like raise their hands all the time and like say things. They would like talk to each other and like they'd like spout out all these equations and things. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing at all. And I think for me, like having that experience was really valuable, but also like really terrifying. So kind of realizing that like I needed to carve my own space out in the class was a really valuable experience.
Yeah, so do you have any tips on how to do that or how you found your fit?
So I was really intimidated at first in the class because there were all these guys like saying equations. But I
Yeah.
think as I like got to know the subject more, I realized that a lot of the stuff they were saying like wasn't actually right. They were just saying stuff. So I think it can be really hard in any class. Like it's really easy to get intimidated because I've kind of felt that in a lot of engineering classes it can kind of be like a shooting match almost, like everyone is trying to like puff themselves up and like seem like they know more than everyone else. Kind of realizing that that's like the reality of the class and trying to make the environment like less like that is the best that you can do. I think for me, I often found that like I actually get a lot of respect if you like ask, like if you say I don't understand what this means, like can you explain this to me? Because all the people who are puffing themselves up and like saying random equations also don't really know what's going on, so they're very appreciative of people that are confident enough to like ask for help and ask questions when they don't know what's going on. So
No, I think that's really awesome advice because oftentimes everyone around you is just like, wow, everybody knows so much and I'm the only one that doesn't know anything. But then you go on to realize that it's not like that. It's usually no one really knows too much and everyone's just, trying to fake it till they make it. And I feel like we all just got to do the same. So what is the best learning experience you've had through a setback or a failure or just in general?
I think I took a really hard course once in biotransport, and I remember struggling a lot and like not really understanding like what was going on. Um, and I think for me it was really hard because there was a lot of like I really hit this big roadblock where I was like, okay, like is this really not like the field for me? Like I'm really struggling. Like I was like getting like low, like I was getting much lower grades than I was like I had normally like come to expect like out of like my degree program. I remember like going to my advisor and being like, hey, I want to switch majors. Like I don't know what I'm gonna switch to. And my advisor was just like, what are you talking about? Like this is one class. Like everyone has the one class that has like one class that's really hard for them. And so I think for me, like realizing that like a lot of times like a lot of people like do really well in like a lot of their classes and um it's hard to come in and have that like first kind of big setback. I think being able to push through that is really, really valuable. And so I actually ended up like obviously staying in the class, staying in my major. I'm like really glad I did because I don't like know what else I would have done if I had a major in BME. So
Yeah, like even for me going into college, I'm like, oh my God, like it's very nerve-wracking. Yeah, but I think this is really helpful advice, especially for most of us who are going into college and there's going to be like harder classes than high school. And it's going to be definitely roadblocks along the way, but the fact that you persisted through and just kept staying in your major, I think would be really helpful advice, and I'm definitely going to take that to heart. Yeah, so when you were in college, what was like your day-to-day schedule like, or even when you were like working, is there something you want to share that people get an insight from?
obviously like the schedule of a college student is very different than like the schedule of high school or like the schedule of working. So I guess the way college works is, you sign up for classes kind of like throughout the day, and then you have all this like free time the rest of the day. So like on average, I would take maybe like 3 hours of class a day, like Monday through Friday, and then I would have all of this like free time.
Yeah.
Outside of that, you can fill with like studying or like hanging out with your friends or like research or like clubs or like anything else you want to do. So this can be really freeing, but it can also be really, I guess, intimidating or like scary because you have to be like you have all this time, but then you have to figure out what to do like with it. So like no one is telling you like, oh, like you have to go to class right now and you have to eat lunch right now, and then like right now is like gym, and like now you go home and like you eat dinner and like you do your homework. Like no one is telling you like those sorts of things. So I found kind of like figuring out how to like make my schedule in college was kind of challenging. I think what I started doing is I have a Google Calendar, and first thing I do is I schedule 7.5 hours every night for sleep because I think that's something a lot of people forget once they get to college.
Yeah.
And then you put in all of your classes, and then you put in all of your meals, and then you put in everything else.
Okay.
Because I think sleeping and eating are the two things that people forget a lot.
Yeah.
And so, and I think also the other like really difficult thing that I found in college is it's really a lot of times like I'll be hanging out with one of my friends and they'll be like, oh, like I just started doing this really cool thing, or like, oh, I just started like this club, or like, oh, I'm like doing research, or like, oh, I'm doing like whatever else, or I'm building this like robot. And it's very easy to be like, oh gosh, I'm not doing that. Like I should do that too. Um, is the great thing about college, but also kind of the curse of college is that there's so many things to do. Like no matter what you want to do, there's like a club for it, or an organization for it, or like people that are willing to do it with you. And so it gets really easy to be like, oh, I want to do this, and then like think you can do it, but then you don't have enough hours like in the day to do all the things that you want. So I think um, that's something to like kind of be, I guess, like careful of, is just that it gets really easy to like overbook yourself because you have all this free time, but there's also like an infinite amount of things to do. In comparison, work life, I didn't do it for too long, just for 3.5 months or so. It's very much kind of like going back to high school where you have kind of a 9 to 5 job and you're responsible for working that entire time, but then once you come home, you don't have any homework, which is nice, so it's a little different than high school. But you have kind of this like free time, and so a lot of people I think coming out of college like really like that schedule because you go to work and then you come home and you can just do whatever you want. You're not like required to like do homework, or like you don't have any other obligations to anyone. So that it's kind of nice. So you have a lot of free time to then do kind of any personal things you want.
Yeah, no, I think it's really helpful that you pointed out that you should make time for like meals and sleeping and all that stuff because like even now when people are piling on classes they don't realize like, oh yes, I have this chunk in the middle, but it's like am I going to be able to go and grab food and everything. So yeah, I think it's important that you shared that we should keep track of all the stuff we have to do.
As a quick follow-up, I will say I think it's very common in STEM fields. I definitely had this experience through high school and in undergrad. There's kind of this idea that like the less sleep you get, like the more hardworking you are. So like for example, at Georgia Tech, like during finals week, there's kind of this culture of like people show up in their like pajamas to their finals and like show up like just with dark circles under their eyes, and they're like, oh, look how cool I am. Like I was so devoted to my academics that I like stayed up all night studying. I haven't even like showered in 3 days or whatever, which is a terrible, terrible culture. Like don't fall prey to that. You can be a really, really successful scientist or engineer or like any of the STEAM fields without sacrificing sleep or your health. So I think kind of moving beyond that and realizing that you don't have to sacrifice any aspect of your like personal health to be to be successful is a huge thing to take away, I would say.
Definitely, that's great advice. Did you have a mentor in college, and did you learn anything from them that you would want to share?
Yeah. So I like to believe that like if you're really lucky, you'll have a lot of mentors throughout, not just in college, but like throughout like your entire career. So I would like to say that I've been lucky enough to have a lot of mentors, whether it be my research advisor, my like scholarship director at Tech, like professors I've taken classes with, and like even my friends. Like there's a lot I have like learned from every single one of them.
Yeah.
I would say honestly the biggest thing I've kind of learned through any of these mentors is just I guess the power of like impacting people. So I think like when you kind of go on and become a scientist, there's this idea that like, oh, I'm gonna like develop the next cure for cancer, or like I'm gonna build like the next like the next level of like wireless communication, or like, oh, I'm going to like build like the next like AI technology or like whatever. And there's this idea that like you need to impact, like in order to be successful, you need to impact society as a whole. You need to impact this like really broad number of people. Which I think like there's a lot of value in like impacting a broad number of people, but there's also a very like profound impact in impacting like a couple of people very deeply, whether that be like through teaching or mentorship or like service. Like that like deep kind of impact you can have on people is like the reason people like volunteer. It's like the reason like doctors like care so much about like individual patients, and like it's the reason people have children, like etc. And so I think for me like focusing on like every individual person that I like get to share life with, or get to interact with, and like making sure that I have a positive impact on them individually, in addition to kind of serving society as a whole, is like probably the biggest thing that my mentors have taught me.
Yeah, that's such awesome advice, you know. Even the little interactions matter. I mean, hearing that like just going into college or people going into their career where it's like, oh yes, I'm going to change the world doing X, Y, and Z. It's also important to remember like the smaller impacts, like you said. So that's super awesome. Yeah, so what's the most interesting thing about you that we wouldn't learn from your resume alone, like passions, hobbies, or just anything interesting in general?
Yeah, in addition to science, probably the thing that I enjoy the most is being outside. I love outdoor recreation, whether that be like rock climbing or kayaking,
Oh yeah.
or like hiking. And so I have been lucky enough during my time at Georgia Tech to be able to lead like multiple kind of big outdoor expeditions. I was part of a big expedition in Iceland, as well as a big backpacking expedition in Alaska. And then I recently got back from a big canoeing expedition in Canada. And so I have found things to do to relax is like be outside. And I found that there's a lot of kind of like growth that you can, there's a lot of growth in kind of spending time in the outdoors, and kind of pushing yourself like physically, and then also like in terms of like leadership, like when you're in the outdoors. And so that has definitely been something I discovered when I was at Georgia Tech, is that I really loved being outside. Um, and it's hopefully something I'll like continue to do in addition to science. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's amazing that you've taken so many trips and really utilized your time at college to just explore your passions and do what you love. So that's super awesome. Okay, and to wrap this up, do you have any advice for a girl looking to start in biomedical engineering or just in STEAM in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my biggest piece of advice is like just go for it. I think we're really lucky that um, we like live in a time where like there are so many like very strong academically driven women out there, and I think you're going to have a lot of support moving forwards, like from other like scientists and engineers and people in STEAM. Um, that being said, like there like will be a lot of challenges. Like there will be times that someone like says something like insensitive to you about like women in STEM or like anything else. There will be times where like you like get a bad grade on a test, or like fail something, or things don't go like the way you expect them to. Um, but like those are the moments that you just kind of have to believe in yourself, realize that you're in the right place, and like this is what you should be doing, and it's really the time that you should lean back, like lean on other people for support. So yeah, it's just to do it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome advice. I completely agree with you. I feel like just jump in and just take that leap would be a super awesome idea. And then you realize like it's really not that hard. I mean, of course there's going to be challenges along the way, but yeah, so thank you, Naka, today for taking the time to talk to us and share your amazing advice. Yeah, and to our viewers out there, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe down below and let us know what you learned from this episode.